I want to say thank you for being here. Rachel's from Atlanta Public Schools. She is going to talk to us today about grants and how to best access them, and the grant writing process, and how this applies to community engagement, partnership, and programs that we are all working in. So without any more introduction, Rachel, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to share this work with us.
Sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm really excited too. We have started to do some of these kind of capacity building workshops within our district, but it's kind of rare that I get to do it with like peers. So very excited to sort of give you an overview of maybe like a grants 101 on how we kind of operate from our office in Atlanta to kind of support programming to fill in the gaps where funding runs short. So like Blake said, I'm the executive director of the APS Office of Partnerships and Development, an office that was started in the fall of 2014 by our superintendent, Dr. Maria Karstarfin, who had an office similarly in Austin, where she was the superintendent prior to coming to Atlanta. It was founded by Katie McDowell, who's also on our call, and she is the director of strategic partnerships at the Lovett School in Atlanta. But Katie founded the office and kind of set it all up, and that's how we still kind of operate today, with the purpose of serving as a liaison between partners in the district and our schools, and also matching unfunded strategic priorities with resources. So that really is kind of on the partnership side, vetting partners, seeking out partners who can help us with our needs at both the district and the school level. And then the development side is fundraising and corporate relations and philanthropic relations. That all runs out of our office too. We are also the one-stop shop for operationalizing partnerships. So that means like through MOUs or putting metrics behind partnerships. We do all of that. And historically in APS, it was hard to partner with the district. People sometimes wouldn't get a call back, or it'd be hard to kind of navigate the intricacies of the bureaucracy. So we've heard feedback that folks really like having kind of an entity within this urban school district where they can kind of count on as a resource for anything kind of APS related. So since today we're talking a lot about grants and fundraising, I just wanted to spotlight a few of our accomplishments over the last year. So our big one in 2017, and that just culminated in early 2018, was a partnership with the College Football Playoff Foundation. So if you're a college football fan, you'll know that the big championship game was in Atlanta this year, and Georgia played Alabama. And so when a city gets a bid for a big game like that, often comes some really cool resources. And so the College Football Playoff Foundation, their whole guidelines and strategic giving is around teachers. And so we developed a program or a grant proposal to the Football Foundation around training teachers in one of our biggest needs, which is literacy. And so we wanted kind of like the most coveted literacy training, and landed on Orton Gillingham. So now what's really cool about this grant is that every K through 5 teacher in APS gets Orton Gillingham training, which is often, too expensive for districts to afford. So it's kind of like our promise to teachers that, if you stay with us in APS, you're going to get this awesome literacy training. And then it also helps our students because they're getting kind of the most effective literacy instruction as a result. So that was an exciting partnership because with, of course, with the leverage that the College Football Playoff Foundation has and all of their assets, like their media. They brought us a lot of other partners. So the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl came on, the Chick-fil-A Foundation came on, and so did the Atlanta Football Host Committee, which is just the committee that helps plan big games in cities. So I think this is a just great example of how you can kind of creatively use maybe some of the corporations in your community, or maybe a big event, and just capitalize on kind of something existing that might not be like a traditional grantor, but that could yield, pretty big, fruit. The other one I'll just highlight real quickly is we have a relationship with the Walton Family Foundation. And like Blake mentioned, I know the charter landscape in Baltimore is different than Atlanta, but and the Walton Family Foundation does support a lot of charter schools and choice schools. But we've found a way uniquely as a public school district to engage with them, since we are, as a district, very open to innovation and kind of new models that help students that have traditionally been, I guess, identified as charter best practices. So through a relationship building with our local program officer, we've gotten a bunch of support from them, including the evaluation of our turnaround strategy. So we developed a really robust turnaround strategy to help turn around our lowest performing schools that was initially created in response to a state takeover threat. But it honestly was, some reform efforts we should have been doing anyway. So because we came up with all of these, robust interventions, we wanted to study them and see if they were actually working. And so Walton is paying for Mathematica, which is a, renowned researcher, to do this evaluation for us, which is already in, after year one, has, given us a lot of insight into what works and what doesn't for kids. So, for example, one of the interventions was high dosage tutoring, and it was found to have not any impact on students at all. So we are now, kind of recalibrating and saying to schools, you don't have to use high dosage tutoring. If you like it, you can of course opt in, but it's not something we're endorsing. So it's kind of cool in real time. We can make changes based on the data. Another way they're helping us build capacity is through the development of some public and teacher data dashboards through Tableau. So they actually pay for a really talented consultant who can build data dashboards for us that are public facing. So now, and I'm not sure if you have this in your districts or communities, but we didn't have a public site where people could go on and look up data about schools other than, greatschools.org or, one of those sites, or, the Georgia Department of Education. So now we can tell our own data stories because we have this contractor working on our dashboards. They also are funding a transportation study for us because transportation in Atlanta is really challenging due to our traffic problems and also due to our aging bus fleet. So we need help figuring out how we're going to get kids to innovative programs and after-school programs. And so they helped us fund a consultant who's doing kind of an asset map and is going to help us get some recommendations about how to fix that. And then another one they just funded was for help with consultants for student-based budgeting, which is a new budgeting algorithm funding formula that we're moving toward. And we needed some help getting set up for that. So I use this as an example because I think it's another way, it's probably not a traditional programmatic grant or, a curricular grant, but it's stuff where we really need help, where we are not the experts. Other people can do it better than we can. So I like the whole idea of developing grants and programs proposals based on, capacity building where other folks can be helpful. And then just a couple more. We had a big early learning grant from the Whitehead Foundation, which is an offshoot of some Coca-Cola money here in Atlanta, in partnership with GEARS, which is the Georgia Early Education Alliance for Ready Students. And essentially this is helping us to form a citywide collaborative where all of the early learning providers in our pre-K classes or pre-K leaders can come together and, share professional development, share resources so that everyone's kind of on the same page. So by the time our kids get to kindergarten, they're ready for school. So this is something that was kind of splintered before in Atlanta, how the early learning providers, whether it's a mom and pop provider or, the YMCA, and then, APS's own classrooms work together. But now this is helping us with things like a common enrollment system. And I highlight this because this is actually a grant that was given to GEARS, and APS is kind of a sub-grantee or recipient of it. And so that's another way that you can, kind of creatively get funding, especially with the challenge that Blake mentioned about how maybe sometimes a charter school won't get funded, but a traditional school will. Perhaps the charter school could lean on the traditional school to be the lead applicant, and then they could be, maybe a partner in the grant. So we do that a lot because APS, of course, is not a nonprofit 501c3. We're a government entity, so sometimes we have to think creatively about who we partner with. One of our philosophies here is that it's okay if a check goes to a partner or someone else, as long as it's helping a kid. So obviously, we need financial support, and we like when donors choose to give directly to APS. But if for some reason they have an issue with it, or they want to fund, our partners like communities and schools who work with us, that's okay, as long as, it's benefiting a kid somehow. And then lastly, we were able to develop a partnership with Delta Airlines, which is headquartered here in Atlanta, to support 2 schools in the South Atlanta cluster, which is one of our most high-need feeder patterns of schools. And we determined this partnership based on geographics. So these 2 schools happen to be located really close to Delta's headquarters. And then a couple other kind of socioeconomic reasons. Like I mentioned, these are 2 really high-need schools. They're also schools with really strong leaders who we knew we could trust to steward a partnership like with such a major airline effectively. And it's been a really good example of kind of like a time, talent, treasure partnership, because they've given their money through employee matching giving, and also just their foundation money. They've also given their time. They send volunteers to the school, 2 schools twice a month, and then to read with students. And then they just do sort of cute things throughout the year, like teacher appreciation, and, in-flight snacks, they call it, for teachers and students, and coats in the winter, some food backpacks around Thanksgiving time. So I just really like that kind of partnership. Again, not a traditional grant, but kind of a great way to work with a corporation in a way that resonates with them and what they're kind of looking for in terms of, customers and future workforce, but also that helps us. So it's a win-win. So I'll just go through a couple grant writing mythbusters that I think I've learned throughout my time as a grant writer and fundraiser. And a lot of people I learned have misconceptions about grant writing, but hopefully you all know the answers to these. But usually I do this activity with, people hold up either agree or disagree. But in this case, I'm just going to zoom through a couple of them by phone. So the first one is I usually ask the audience, do you agree or disagree that you will win each grant you apply for? And this is disagree, because unfortunately there's a lot of other factors in grants just besides writing a beautiful proposal. There's, strict guidelines about, the rubric, of course, following directions on the grants. There's also sometimes it's predetermined, who's going to get the grant, whether it's a regional thing. A lot of times in the city of Atlanta, state grants, sometimes we're not always the recipients just because they want to spread out to maybe some more rural counties. So there's a lot of other factors, or maybe you've won the grant every year and it's time for someone else's turn. And then sometimes it comes down to even like 1 point. We've been kind of on the receiving end of being, 1 point away from being selected, just based on how the reviewers scored our grant. So just important to remember to follow the prompt, have a really good program design, and also, as we'll talk about, just how important it is to develop relationships with the funding agency too. This one, grants come with no strings attached, agree or disagree. This is disagree too, because with great power comes great responsibility. So oftentimes there's a lot of strings, a lot of robust reporting requirements, a lot of kind of accountability to the funder. It'll depend on the funder. Some will have, want informal check-ins from time to time. Some will want, a very lengthy report. But when you do get a grant, you are accountable to that funder and accountable to what you say you were going to do with that generous funding. So it's just important to, if there is a change, to be honest with the funder, and just to remember that it's not a loan. It's not something you're going to pay back. So in return, you should deliver on what you promised, or what the behavior change that you expected to see should be. Some grants, like a 21st Century grant from the state, that if you don't meet your numbers on attendance for the after school program, they'll pull your funding back. So there are strings, but if you have a good solid design, you should have no problem. We just sort of talked about this. I have to pay grant money back, and that answer is disagree to. So you only have to pay it back if you, are not a good steward of it. But that is the good thing about grants, is that it is a gift to you. So yeah, just meeting the metrics, meeting the requirements. We've had to pay some money back. So I'll use an example. We had when I first came on board. In this job, we were doing a lot of writing grants for schools, and we found out quickly that's not the best way to do it. We really want to build the capacity of our schools to design the proposals themselves, because they know their communities best. They know what their limitations are, and so we found out for one of the grants that a lot of the schools weren't implementing the program at all, and so we had a conversation with the funder and decided it was in everyone's best interest if we just returned the money to them, which was hard. It was a hard, conversation to have, and a hard decision, but it was the right thing to do. And then this one, if I have a grant question about a grant, I can contact the foundation directly and build a relationship with them. And this one is agree. Because yes, we definitely encourage building relationships with foundations and grantors and companies. Often they like to be informed, they like to be in the loop, and it's just the best way to do stewardship. Sometimes it's just even if you don't want, a dime from them, just get to know them as friends, and have them be advocates for you in their circles. A lot of times I will just, like I mentioned before, I'll just meet with funders, even if I know they'll never give APS donations, just because they fund our other partners, and we just want, to be viewed by them as, a strong partner. So this is always helpful, especially if you have to make a change, a budget change, or obviously if you want to go back to them for future funding. It's always good to get to know program officers, get to know the people in businesses in corporate social responsibility, and develop a rapport. And then lastly, I can apply for a grant even if I've never written one before, and the answer is yes. We definitely encourage people to seize the opportunities. As you know, we'll talk about some grants are easier than others, but it's a skill that everyone can learn and do well. And nothing brings me more joy when, I sort of see someone at a school who we've maybe helped coach or work through a grant proposal when they win. It's really exciting. So yes, we think that even if you're not a skilled grant writer, that you can definitely write one and become really good at it. So really quickly, these are just the typical proposal elements that we see. There's always, going to be an executive summary or a prompt asking you to kind of like succinctly describe your program or what you're trying to do. Even if there isn't an abstract or executive summary, I always encourage people to write one, because you can either hand it out as a one-pager to funders, or it just might also help you just kind of, wrap your head around easily, kind of like a really quick elevator pitch about what your program is about. There's always a narrative section, and typically in the narrative section, they ask you to describe your statement of need. So basically, this is about, why will this funding change things? So, like, if it were not for this funding, what would happen, basically, is how I try to look at the needs statement. Data is obviously great to put in there, and numbers, but, and, also just storytelling, if you have any kind of anecdotal feedback, is good. But really, they're just looking for, like, how come you can't fund this yourself, and why. A project description of exactly what you're going to do. Organization information is always good to put in the narrative. Basically, why are you the best person to do this work? And then there's typically, a summary or conclusion. A lot of times in the narrative, you're asked to talk about sustainability of the grant and how you're going to, continue funding after it ends. And then there's typically always a budget section, either a budget template or something that you would create yourself to show how you are going to spend the funds. And then oftentimes you're asked to submit supporting materials like letters of support or artifacts that support your cause. I always encourage people in grants to begin with just a really solid program design. Again, like I said, even if your writing is beautiful, I think people can see, reviewers can see through that, and they can, see if you don't have a really tight plan. So start to think about the elements like we talked about. What's the need? Is it large scale? Is it more programmatic? Is it at the classroom level or something more macro? Decide, like, I always encourage a concise needs statement. Like I said, like a quick elevator pitch. Once you have kind of a really focused, kind of one sentence, if you can go back to that as you're writing, that's always really helpful. You can also think about what groups will benefit from the need, how many people will be affected, what behavior will change as a result. Always thinking about evidence to support the needs, and then, of course, having measurable goals. Also think about the stakeholders who you need buy-in from before moving forward. You know, in school districts like Atlanta, which it isn't huge, we have about 100 sites, but it's not small either. So if you think about, you know, APS central office where I work as like maybe like the national office or like a chain or a brand like Vera Wang, and then all of the schools are like the Vera Wang stores. You know, if you were an individual store or a school, you might have to get some buy-in from leadership. So it's always good to think about who you need to talk to before you submit the grant, who's going to be impacted. And then, do you have any other funding sources you can tap for support? For us, it might be things like Title I, or Donors Choose for teachers, who can maybe help to, you know, make up for the other expenses in the proposal. And then, obviously, thinking about the budget specifically in your design. So, for example, it's not we're going to buy just iPads, but you're going to buy 65 iPads at $200 each. And then after program design, I always like to think about how we know we'll be successful. So think about how you will evaluate. SMART goals are always a typical part of a grant, as well as other key indicators of success. How are you going to collect data and analyze what happens? Maybe it's classroom observations, or maybe it's surveys, or maybe you are required by the grant to get a third-party evaluator, but that's always, you know, really important to think about. Develop a timeline to monitor the success of the program on an ongoing basis, because that's going to inform how you're going to report to the funder. And thinking about your specific plan of action on both your process implementation and your progress. So for that college football grant that I mentioned, you know, since they're not a typical, you know, foundation grantor, they don't really have strict reporting guidelines. So we had to come up together with what we thought was best, and we decided on, you know, we're going to report mid-year and end of year every year, but then we also have this kind of informal check-in once a month, just because there is so much money at stake. They want to know that we're really kind of spending it appropriately. So I'm on the phone with him often, and he even comes to visit me a lot, which can be interesting when I only have a week to prepare, but it's just good to have an agreed upon way of how you're going to evaluate and how you'll know that you've done a good job. Just some quick other things that funders want to know. Why are you the best organization to do this work? Like I said, how will the project sustain itself in the long run? And how does it align with their guidelines? So lately, you know, I've had a lot of companies approach me and say, you know, what are your top 3 needs? And, you know, we have so many needs. So sometimes I'll flip it and I'll ask them, you know, or I'll just tell them the story of APS, and then I'll ask them to tell me what resonates with them, because maybe it's our teacher work, or maybe it's what we're doing in literacy. So it's always good to ask funders, you know, what's important to them, not really like chasing their money and making your program fit for them, but just learning about what's important to them. And then maybe you do have a need. It might be a different need than you originally set out to talk to them about, but maybe you have something that's more aligned and more compelling for them, and what's important to them. And then next, it's like I mentioned, stakeholder support is really huge. Here's some suggestions for how to get some help. If your school or district or, you know, umbrella agency has an office like ours, you should definitely leverage that and ask for help with different parts of the proposal. what we do a lot when we partner with other entities on grants is we'll put things in a Google Doc and we'll work collaboratively on the application together, which I really like, and helps with version control and also just, holds everyone accountable. And then also, it's always good to engage with content experts. So for us, if we're writing, a science grant, we'll definitely want the science coordinators involved. And, we need their data and we need their, additional resources and maybe their expertise. And so when you win, I always just like to tell people to make sure to keep the funder informed, even after you win. Maybe put a calendar tickler about following up with them from time to time. And maybe if the last time it was an email, maybe you call them this time. Be very responsive to them and also do what you said you were going to do. And then if you don't win the grant, just remember it's not personal. You can also find out why. That's perfectly normal to ask for feedback or even the reviewer's comments. Ask them about future funding, say like, I understand that we're not going to be funded now, but could I reach out to you in, 3 to 6 months for, another opportunity? And then of course, just move on and try to seek other prospects, but it happens all the time. Unfortunately, you won't win every single one, but that doesn't mean that someone else won't fund you. And just other last key takeaways, start with an outline is my process, and I'm happy to send you kind of what I like to use and some good templates that I've found over the years. Keep your language clear and concise, focus on the funder's interests and guidelines, and then of course to revise and edit before submitting. It's always great to have grammar, perfect. And then some funders for your radar, or just kind of how we think about funding. So there's federally, of course, the U.S. Department of Education has, the big dollars. The I-3 grant is now called EIR. So that is for, big research, heavy programmatic grants. Other federal opportunities through like the Department of Justice. So for example, while we're an education agency, we also have other needs such as safety. So a couple years ago, we applied to a National Institute of Justice grant for school safety and were awarded that. So just because you might fit into a different bucket doesn't mean you can't take advantage of their funding. State departments of education always have grants that they get through mostly the federal dollars that trickle down to them. Local foundation grants, obviously, the national foundations are great to keep up with, and we've been fortunately successful in getting a couple national funders to grant us here in Atlanta. And then, of course, your local companies that are around your community, thinking about approaching them. And then national companies have grant programs like, Target, of course, and other large companies that have a presence in every state. And then lately we've been seeing a lot of competition. So there was the XQ grant, which was from Steve Jobs' widow, Laureen Pelljobs, through the Emerson Collective, and then MacArthur does competitions, and I think we'll start seeing a lot more of those from philanthropy coming down the pike. And I am happy to help. I can send some sample grants that have won. And budget templates. I'm happy to review proposals, send information about upcoming grants to the network that I've heard about, and send some tips and tools and other information that can be helpful. So that was all I had. I know it was a lot of information, but happy to take questions or comments.
Thank you, Rachel, so much. If anybody has any questions, feel free to just speak up. It's a free for all here. There aren't too many of us that we can't manage it ourselves. No questions?
Hey Blake, it's Katie. Hi Rachel. Good job.
Hi Katie.
I just wanted to see if everyone on the webinar is at a private school or I think I heard someone mention charter school.
Not currently at a charter school. Stephanie, who we can see the top of her head, she's from a foundation a nonprofit organization funded by Baltimore Community Foundation in Baltimore. Okay. And then Kayla is here, but it says it's McGee, but that she's from an independent school in Rochester.
Okay.
And then we had the other people that were here were two other foundation nonprofit leaders and two independent school folks. Okay. So not a lot of charter or public school.
Okay. Well, I was just going to make the point because I was with APS for a while and then came to an independent school now, that a lot of what Rachel said really applies to our work as well. And I know at first you think, oh, well, I'm a private school, I could never get state funding or partner with the public school district or any of that, but that is not the case. And having been at Lovett now for a year, I'm realizing more and more how we can partner with our public schools and with foundations to try and meet all of our needs. So for example, here at Lovett, we've partnered with Atlanta Public Schools and the Chick-fil-A Foundation and received a $400,000 grant over 3 years to bring some students from one of the APS's local middle schools to Lovett in the summer. And it's through a nonprofit program we have called Breakthrough Atlanta. We also received a grant from the Goizueta Foundation, which is the former CEO of Coke. And that foundation funded Lovett to help bring Hispanic students to Lovett in partnership with working with the public schools. So my point is that it doesn't seem like it's a fit and that there would be opportunities to partner on grants, but there are a lot, and we've been successful in a couple of cases.
Katie, in your experience, when you're doing these grants, and I mean, these are phenomenal because I think independent schools they struggle and a lot of times are sort of put off by grants because they don't think that they'll qualify. So do you feel like you have to put the public school as the primary, saying that they're partnering with Lovett as opposed to Lovett is partnering with APS or, what have you?
I would say it can go either way. So in the case of the Chick-fil-A grant, the money is actually coming to Lovett for those students to come to Lovett in the summer. But in a number of other cases, Rachel, I don't know if you can think of one off the top of your head, but we've partnered, I can't think of one right now, but I think it could go either way. And like, there's a huge Gates grant out right now. I don't know if any of you are applying for that. But we at Lovett, we weren't qualified to be the grantee in it. And so we worked with Rachel and some others. And Rachel, did APS end up applying for it or the nonprofit Atlanta?
We ended up going through the partners. So yeah, we were kind of a recipient or a partner in the grant. We had Achieve Atlanta, which is our nonprofit partner, be the lead applicant in that case. So yeah, we do it all the time. It's just depending on the funder and what we think might be better. A lot of times too, yeah, it's like if you're not eligible that, you know, kind of decides it. And then also maybe if like, you know, in the example of Love It, if Love It has gotten, you know, the funding successfully previously, we might want to, you know, use them as the lead applicant. So there's a lot of different factors. But it can easily, I mean, even sometimes even a letter of support from the superintendent, if it's for, you know, a independent school grant, just to kind of show our support or endorsement can be helpful too, even if we're not, you know, a partner in the grant.
I think it's just one more reason why you should have partners, right? Because now you can access the grants through, if there's 4 of you, then you have 4 different avenues to approach a grant, instead of saying, oh, well, I don't qualify. It's really cool. So, okay, I'm a grant novice. So instead, if anybody wants to jump in, just speak up. But where do you find out about when grants are out and what their process is and when they're due, et cetera? Is there a place that culminates grants for educational or children or something along that line?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. The Foundation Center, is a great place to start. And then if you're a member of the Foundation Center, you can get specifically information about, you know, K-12, or by category. Then there's also, you know, the way we do it is through like some K-12 listservs that we found. So like there's one called Grant Siren, Grant-A-Gram. I can send you all of these links. Subscribe to for the U.S. Department of Education's grants. It's a lot of, honestly, subscribing and signing up for newsletters, and even, you know, each foundation updates. I get, you know, so many of them, but you know, they're really helpful. Ideally, you'd make your own kind of calendar of the cycles, but sometimes that's always like hard to do. So sometimes you just have to kind of keep track in your own way. But yeah, again, developing relationships with the program officers, so they'll tell you, you know, we're going to be having a grant coming out, or this is, you know, when you should apply. For a lot of them, you have to be invited to apply. So that whole like rapport development is really important. But there's a lot too that you can just submit a letter of inquiry for, and then, you know, they'll be in touch from there. We do a lot of Googling too. Again, a lot of relying on partners. So like, I just got a request yesterday. One of the schools wants to build a planetarium. You know, are there any grants available for a planetarium? And
is that coming back up?
Yeah. So, you know, I reached out to the museum in town that has a planetarium to be like, you know, can you hook me up with someone from NASA? Maybe. So yeah, it's kind of a variety of different ways, but I'm happy to send you kind of the ones that we rely on the most. And then again, it depends on, you know, kind of locally, you might just have to put in some time to, you know, do a search. If it's Baltimore, you know, Baltimore funders, and then go to their websites and kind of pull down their information.
And I know that the major foundations that you've been getting these big grants from are locally based, right? So is Chick-fil-A located in Atlanta, or is that a relationship based off of this football game?
It is located here. We're really fortunate in Atlanta to have so many kind of Fortune 500 companies located here. But sometimes, you know, I know Chick-fil-A, even if, you know, they do a lot of local Atlanta grants, but they also have some programs, you know, nationwide. Or I know they empower their restaurant operators a lot to do work in the community. So sometimes it's even, you know, the local Chick-fil-A restaurant, even if it's not Chick-fil-A corporate. But yeah, most of them are Atlanta based, or there is an Atlanta connection. But sometimes, you know, like we're trying to work with the Overdeck Foundation, which is based in New York. the Novo Foundation, the Kellogg Foundation are ones that we've been successful with. And then, of course, Walton, which is a national funder, but they do have kind of a local Atlanta person who has Atlanta in her portfolio. So sometimes it works like that. They could be a national funder, and then there's just a representative kind of for the region who does grants locally.
And so when you reach out, do you just blindly introduce yourself? I'm just asking, I have zero problem just sending out hi, I'm Blake, and this is what we're doing, and it's fantastic, and I'd love to talk to you for a minute. Is that how you just start?
Or LinkedIn.
Sometimes.
Oh, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I love LinkedIn.
See who you know that knows them that could introduce.
Yeah, exactly what Katie said is like, I'll try to, if there's someone that I want to get to, maybe like it's someone at Wells Fargo and I know someone at Bank of America, I might be like, do you know, this person, can you make an introduction? That's always the best way. Or sometimes it's, even if I don't know them personally, maybe, our superintendent, Dr. Karstarfin, knows them, or even if she doesn't, maybe they've heard of her and it might be better coming from her. So I'll get her to reach out to them and just sort of, kind of using your network. But it's not unheard of to write a cold email. I just, just making sure it's thoughtful and,
I do it for work all the time, and I'm always like finding some random way we're connected that's like, 17 degrees of separation, but just so that they read the email a little more carefully. I saw we both spent the summer of 1984 in the Outer Banks.
Totally. Yeah, but those letters of inquiry too, like a lot of times if you go on their sites, they'll say like, we don't accept unsolicited proposals, but, there's an email address there that's for kind of general inquiries. That's always a good place to start too.
Great. I'm taking up all the time. Stephanie, you have any questions, or whoever else is on here? Stephanie, where do you guys get most of your grants? Do you get your grants just from Baltimore Community Foundation, or?
We get 0 grants from Baltimore Community Foundation.
So I'm just making that up?
Yeah. We are an initiative of the Baltimore Community Foundation, but they do not support us. We have our own budget. It does not go in line with their budget. They're basically a fiscal agent for us. That's the best way to describe it. So I just did my numbers, and last year, 77% of our donations came from individuals.
Wow.
Only 11% from foundations. I'm finding that foundation money is harder and harder as there's really great foundations in the area, and philanthropic dollars are not, multiplying. Although there were some things that was said on the webinar that I was taking notes the whole time, so I didn't mean to keep my head down, but it was making me think of different foundations and corporations and how we might be able to get in and partner. But yeah, most of ours are individuals.
Yeah, when I was talking to Mike at the Neighbors, I used to live in Baltimore, and so I know a little bit, enough to be dangerous, but, obviously Under Armour and the gentleman that owns the Ravens and the Orioles, those people should really care about the city and therefore should care about, the children of the city. So
you would think I get support from none of them. Under Armour, the problem is because we don't have a full athletic component, and that's what they really believe in is the athletic. I mean, we include fun athletics, but we're really an academic program, and we're a program that is trying to break down the social barriers between two very different communities. And I've been unsuccessful getting into Under Armour or into the Orioles and the Ravens with Bishotti, but I continue to try to work those angles.
Yeah. We talked a lot too about the angle of maybe it's for teachers, or, because there's a lot of foundations and funders and companies, maybe they, maybe it's about, not about students, but, they want customers or they want the, adults to sign up for their, insurance program or something.
Yeah.
So they want to get in front of adults and might help out in that way.
That is one of the things that actually struck with me as I was thinking about during our 5 weeks of the summer, we spend almost $400,000 on teachers because we only take experienced teachers. We don't take teachers who haven't been teaching or who are just in first year teaching. We really get those seasoned teachers. So I was thinking that might be a way, if I spin it, that's a great deal. I mean, that's 3/4 of our budgeting for the summer. If it, in essence, does help the kids to have those type of teachers. So if people fund teaching, that might be a way to try to take on.
That's great.
Well, and not to harp on the sports, but lots of the athletes themselves have their own foundations, and lots of your independent school communities are their parents at those schools.
Yes.
So,
and our private school heads have actually been more open in the last year or so to introducing to us to people on their boards that they would open up to us. Before, that's like a development no-no, but they actually see it would be beneficial for the school and for the program, which is very true, but getting some to believe that.
That is music to my ears, because that's all that's a shift that is great for all of this work. If schools are proud of this partnership work and they're selling it back to their board of something that is part of their mission and that they should be proud of, I mean, I'm all in. I think that's fantastic. So that's great. He's not even in Baltimore anymore, but I'm just thinking specifically about this. He's a former Raven named Torrey Smith. I don't know who he is. And he is now at the Carolina Panthers, but I met him years ago when they won the Super Bowl and he came to Annapolis and my son was there, whatever. He was so nice to my son that I immediately started following him on Instagram and all this stuff. And he is from Prince George's County. Yeah, Prince George's County. And he gives back so much to the schools there. And he calls Baltimore his home. And he's the kind of guy who I think, he's constantly giving back. So I have zero connection to him aside from one selfie we took outside the State House in Annapolis. But just keep him on your radar.
Okay.
And I think that's how these things sort of happen, right?
Exactly. I'm going to search my board and see who has a connection.
Right. So anyway, just I think it's just us at this point. Everybody is sort of taken off.
Okay.
But do you have any other questions? Or Rachel, seriously, thank you so much. Even just completely selfishly, thank you for sharing this information with me, but for all of us. I had a number of emails while you were speaking about people not being able to make it for this, that, or the other, and they're all looking forward to the video. But if it's okay with you, I'll also share your slides. Is that all right?
Yeah. Right.
Because I think it's really, really helpful. I think it's overwhelming for a lot of people to venture into this grant process, but man, it could be informative for so many programs if not having to fight for school dollars, having your own source of income. So anyway, thank you. Stephanie, you have anything else you want to ask or contribute?
No, I think this was great.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys so much. Thanks, Katie, for being here. And I will talk to all of you soon. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you guys.
Bye.